So I've been playing Killer 7. So Killer 7 was part of the Capcom 5, an ambitious project to raise GameCube awareness back when Capcom used to be cool. You see, the GameCube wasn't doing too well at first, so Capcom made 5 games exclusively for the system to get more people to buy it. These games were NPO 3, Beautiful Joe, Dead Phoenix, Resident Evil 4, and Killer 7. Now, despite these all being great games, well, most of them anyway, the project didn't go too well. Dead Phoenix ended up getting cancelled, NP3 wasn't all that good, and Capcom ended up porting RE4, Beautiful Joe, and Killer 7 to the PS2 later down the line. Also, the only thing that these games really had in common was that they all were overseen by Shinji Mikami, the man responsible for series like Devil May Cry and Resident Evil. But the man mostly responsible for Killer 7 was Goichi Suda, also known as Suda51. This is the game that basically launched his career as a writer and effectively gave him quite the fan following. Now, I've always been interested in his work, but I've never played any of his games before, so I thought it was high time to change that. And what better way to start than what is by most people considered to be his best work.
These dudes have got energy to spare. We're talking guys who beat off 4 times a day.
Now, I'm going to say something really obvious and stupid, but I feel like it's a fitting thing to say here more than anywhere. This game is weird, and possibly the most adult game ever without shoving tits and dicks in your face. You see, most Suda games are a little jokey. This game isn't jokey. At least not in a dick tits farty butts kind of way. The game is funny in a self-aware, it's just like my Japanese anime kind of way. It's the closest thing I've seen to art house in a game so far. Anyway, the game takes place in an alternate 21st century. Basically, global peace is a thing, and to celebrate this, all nuclear weapons have been destroyed by being fired up into the upper atmosphere. However, a terrorist group called the Heaven Smile are here to ruin the party. That's where the Killer 7 come in. The Killer 7 are a group of assassins led by our main protagonist Harmon Smith, a disabled man who suffers from the multifoliate personae phenomenon. Basically, he can transform into 7 different assassin personas, effectively being the entire group on his own. And as this group, Harmon has to stop the Heaven Smile from creating a war between the US and Japan. At least, that's the basic gist of it. There is a lot more going on, but I'd rather not spoil that for people. Gameplay-wise, it's... yeah. Basically, it's part on-rail shooter and part action-adventure. You don't freely roam around the levels, instead you get to pick from a set few predetermined paths. To progress, you have to solve puzzles and kill the Heaven Smile. The puzzles are fairly self-explanatory. If you've ever played an adventure game or a survival horror game, this'll probably seem a bit formulaic to you. Similar to a game like Silent Hill, you find a thing and you don't know what the thing is for. Then you find another thing somewhere else, and then you just use the thing on the thing you found before. For instance, the game has this thing called elemental rings. So when you find an unlit candle, you just use the fire ring on it. Also, you need to switch between Harmon's persona to solve some puzzles. Thing is, all of his persona have their own unique abilities when it comes to both fighting and puzzling. For instance, one of them can open padlocks, and the other one has a really big gun to blow up cracked walls. It's all pretty basic stuff, but it works. However, should you still get lost, you can always get a few tips from this guy. I feel that this is really the game's strongest point. The characters and what they say. Thing is, all people that the Killer 7 assassinate will follow you around as ghosts, to give you tips or to provide you with information regarding the game's story. They all speak in this really weird cryptic mumble. The things they say are surprisingly well written though, and can be quite funny. Also, I actually really got attached to quite a few of them. even though they weirded me out when I first started playing. The game somehow manages to have characters that are disturbing, but extremely likable at the same time. It all comes down to a good balance between humor and dark edginess. The game can almost be like a campy action movie or an anime, and then be like a dark, depressing art house movie only a few minutes later. The only thing I can really compare it to is maybe Kill Bill. But even then, I would argue that this game does a better job at creating that weird campy art house combination. I say that because I feel that this kind of narrative, and the whole assassin thing, actually really works better for a game than it would do for any other medium. Of course, you could argue that, but that's just how I feel about it. Anyway, let's talk about the shooting. When you walk around the map, you'll occasionally hear laughter coming out of nowhere. That indicates that a heaven smile is nearby. So when you hear that sound, you need to switch to first person mode, scan the area, since they are initially invisible, and then kill them once located. The way you kill them depends on the type of heaven smile you're dealing with. Some have heavy armor and are required to be hit at a certain weak spot, some require a certain persona to deal with them, and some can just be riddled with bullets willy-nilly until they die, or you could target their weak spot and kill them instantly. You must kill them as quickly as possible though, since when they get too close, they'll explode. Once defeated, you'll collect their blood, which comes in two varieties, thick blood and thin blood. Thick blood is used as a type of experience, and can be used to improve stats like in RPGs, and thin blood is used to refuel health and is also used for special attacks. Anyway, should you die by having too many smiles explode on you, you need to retrieve the corpse from where you died. You do this by switching to Garcian, one of Smith's persona, going to the place where you died, and then revive the corpse. For as far as I know, there isn't really any kind of limit as to how many times you can do this per mission, and the areas are just small enough that it never felt like a big hassle for me to retrieve a corpse. Still, I can imagine that if you would die a couple of times in a row, it could get a little annoying to have to do the same corpse run over and over. Either way, the game doesn't really punish you for dying by taking something away or anything like that, and it made it really easy for me to keep going after I died, instead of quitting out of frustration. Anyway, the gameplay doesn't really fall into any kind of specific category, and it might be best for you to play it yourself to really see how it plays. I mean, the controls are a little unusual, but they work really well once you get used to it, and I can definitely see why they went with this control scheme. I'll try and explain. To move forward on a rail, you press X, and you turn around by pressing triangle. To shoot, press the R1 button to switch to first person, then press L1 to scan the area for smiles, and then press triangle to lock on. You shoot with X, and some characters can use special charge attacks by pressing square. Once you reach a door or a hallway you can enter, you need to select which way to go by using the left analog stick to select the panel corresponding with the direction you want to go in. Now, the control scheme and the fact that the game is on rails gives the game the ability to have an amazing balance between cinematic gameplay and playability. I feel like they really took the time to think this through, and it's possibly the best control scheme for a cinematic game I've ever seen. I certainly feel like this is a better option for a game like this than the more obvious choice of tank controls. Also, the game is really fair in its difficulty, in terms of puzzles and the way it treats bosses. I mean, the bosses, which are essentially little puzzles and minigames themselves, are really hard in the sense that it's difficult to figure out what to do, but not to actually do it. So once you know what to do, you can just go ahead and do it and feel triumphant and smart without getting the additional torture more traditional action games might put you through. It made the game a lot of fun for me to play, and it never felt boring or tedious to me at all. Also, if you haven't noticed by now, the game's art style is really one of its more noticeable traits. The soundtrack is also really good, and its jazzy ambient vibes really fit with the game's minimalist art style. It's games like this that really make me want to get into game design myself. I mean, it's stylish all the way down to the fonts, and it's stuff like that that just really turns me on. The only fault the game really has are its loading screens, though I'm not sure how much the game itself is actually to blame for something like that. Also, the frame rate completely shits itself more often than it probably should. Anyway, after playing this, I really want to experience some more Suda. So I probably should go and check out some of his other masterpieces like No More Heroes. Or maybe the aesthetically similar Killer is Dead. Well, I bought Lollipop Chainsaw. So join me next week for my review of Lollipop Chainsaw. I mean, if you want, I guess. You know, you don't have to. It's just, you know, I'd like it if you did. America, you need to sound so America. You need to be like an American, or else people will point and laugh at your accent, yeah. They will be, hey Dutch boy, why do you sound so Dutch? And I'm like, oh my god, I don't know. I need to sound like an American, or else they will throw rocks at me. Ooh.